The Wheel of Time, Season 2, Episode 5. This was one that I spent more time than usual preparing for this review, because when I first watched it, I watched it twice in order to make sure that my thoughts were, fully developed. When I first watched it, I thought, this is not as good as the previous couple episodes, which were, very good, and I think a big step up for the show. After watching it again, I appreciate it more, but at the same time, I'm in this kind of weird in-between state where it's like, the show is really going in the right direction. Things are vastly improving. However, there are still a few nagging things in the show that drag it down and make me think this is a solid 7 or 8 show, but I love The Wheel of Time. And if they just corrected a few more things and upped the production, made it look a little bit better, this could be, a 9-10 show. So I'm in that in-between state. I'm going to try to focus more on the positive. There's plenty of places where you can see negative reviews of things. But, let me highlight a few things that I think they could have done better as well.
This is Fantology.
You may have heard of us.
So first of all, what's going well? Well, the plot is going well. We are now basically back on track with the events of Book 2 and set up for a good season finale. Everyone's got something exciting to do. Well, almost everyone. I'll get to that in a little bit. That's kind of a separate season-long thing rather than episode thing. But for this episode specifically, highlights were the Forsaken, specifically Lanfear and Shamael. I thought their interactions and their individual things that they were doing really captured the spirit of the book for those characters and for the whole idea of, the Forsaken. There's a lot of different types of evil in the Wheel of Time, which I think they're doing very well. But the Forsaken are the most black and crazy and unhinged servants of the Dark One. And they really, you really feel that when they're on screen. The dream sequence, especially with Lanfear and Shamael at the end, was cool. I'm not totally sold on the whole Rand chained to a wheel, Lanfear looking like Gila out of Thor 3 thing. We'll see where that goes. Looks a little cheesy to me. But anyway, I think in general, what the Forsaken are doing is awesome. I'm excited to see more. It looks like we're getting at least Grendel and Moghedien and quote-unquote the boys. So who knows, multiple male Forsaken coming down the road as well. Although Moiraine does say, if the Forsaken all get free, we're screwed. We'll see how true that is. I really hope they do all get free, because the more Forsaken we have on the playing field, the more exciting it is. Also, arriving in force and giving the show an awesome positive influx is Aviendha. We get her a little bit sooner than we see in the books, but I am totally here for it, because I think that this character is done very well. And we get 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes of her and Perrin, and it was all awesome. I mean, the fight was cool, and then their interaction afterwards was fun, gave the show some much needed levity. Aviendha isn't a comic relief character, but she is from a different culture, and there's always these cultural misunderstanding things that I think are fun in fantasy. It's a trope that gets used over and over again, and every time it does, I enjoy it. So I'm very much looking forward to more Aviendha, and I'm also appreciating Perrin at this point. Perrin finally has some volition of his own to go out and make some choices. He's not just running around scared and fleeing from the latest threat. And I like seeing him, sparing people and choosing to let Aviendha go. And this is kind of his character now, rather than scared blacksmith that is moping around. Now he's got a character, which is good. And I think that's kind of a theme throughout this episode. We see Rand making a choice to try to go along with Moraine's plan of duping Lanfear, playing along with her for now. Rand previously also was just kind of running around scared, didn't know what was going on, and maybe not always scared. Previously he was with Lanfear and had a little bit of a plan to learn more about himself with Logain, but now he is the one making choices. That's nice to see. Also, the girls, Nynaeve, Elaine, Egwene, now totally free from the tower. They're off on their own adventure. Egwene is captured, so she's going to have a hard time getting out of, running around scared for a while. But Nynaeve and Elaine are going to have some awesome opportunities here to make some choices, figure out what they're going to do to free Egwene and on their own in Falma, sneak it around undercover. I'm looking forward to seeing more of this. So those are all a lot of positives. And in general, I do think the show and season 2 is moving in the right direction. I'm excited for it. I'm excited to see more. However, I'm at this point, like I said before, where I feel like a few things could take it to like a really elite 8 or 9 show that people are talking about. This is the point where Game of Thrones got to be a big deal, right? After seasons 2, 3, etc. People were really into it. So let's see if Wheel of Time can take that next step. The things that I think the main thing for me is scope and general quality. So when I say scope, I mean this is an epic fantasy show. We have a big map, we have a lot of nations, we have a lot of people involved in this big conflict. Would you believe that it's that big if the characters weren't telling you it was? Meaning, have there been any instances of really big conflicts with a lot of people or really big shots of big expansive things? There's been some. The battle with the Shanshan at Atuan's Mill was like, there were maybe like 100 plus people there. That was well done, but at the same time, it was a small village comparatively, right? We have not seen any big nations go face off each other. And now I know, right? It's a TV show. There's a limited budget. We can't just be doing this all the time. However, I think you have to be smart when you're running a big fantasy TV show. You've got to have enough budget and use it in enough places to give us enough shots of big cities, big groups of people, big battles. Like you need 1 or 2 of these things to just show the viewer that yes, this is a big deal. In Game of Thrones, I think the first time was like the battle of the Blackwater, where we were at King's Landing and the ships were exploding and there was a big fight outside of the Red Keep, or maybe not the Red Keep, but outside of King's Landing. And again, if I think back to that, the battle itself, they were in smaller groups and there were smaller groups of soldiers fighting each other. But it gave this sense of, this is a big conflict. And Wheel of Time has tried to do that at the end of season 1. There was a big battle. We know COVID affected that. It didn't look great. So what I'm looking forward to here at the end of season 2 is the big battle that's brewing outside of Falma. We heard before the season that this was supposed to be a really big fight, bigger than Gladiator. That's what a lot of, the little soundbite was around the show. So I hope that's true. I hope that this reinforces the idea that it is a big, epic fantasy story, because ultimately that's what it is. That's at the heart of the show. That's at the heart of the books. I should say it's at the heart of the books. I hope it becomes at the heart of the show. So let's see that. Now, general quality that I would like to see improved. I thought in this episode specifically, it really stood out to me that some of the sets were not looking great. They were just, you could tell they're not real, right? Which you don't want to have, because that pulls you out of the big fantasy story that you're in. And in this episode especially, it stood out because they were jumping around to a lot of different places, and we saw a lot of the sets that they have made and they have at their disposal. Things like the ways don't look great, look super fabricated and human created. And then there's several that, like anytime there's brickwork or they're in one of their human created sets, it just looks like someone slapped this together and kind of put a layer of plaster over it and it's painted, and it's not quite there, right? There are some good sets. Like when they did Emmons Field, they obviously spent a ton of money on that and it looks really awesome. Whenever they film anything that you can tell is on location in an older actual human constructed building, right? These things look cool. But then there are a few where it's like, let's up this a little bit. This episode was filmed really heavily at night, and the nighttime lighting doesn't really pop very well. I think we see this in a lot of big shows. I don't know enough about TV production, but I do know enough to say that whatever they're doing here, I think is a result of lower budgets, and they have to kind of slap some editing onto the nighttime filming to try to make it look better. And it often looks kind of dark and flat, and it's tough to see everything. Better than House of the Dragon, where it was this blackish green hues and you couldn't even tell what was going on for that one episode. But here it does suffer, and let's just level this up a little bit. The last thing was, I think the majority of the writing is pretty good, but there are some instances of heavy-handed, kind of cheesy writing. 2 examples. So Moraine kills the horse, right? Did she need to kill the horse? Couldn't they have just brought it along with them? Their strategy was to go off anyway, so the horses were all empty when Lanfear finally caught up with the horse keeper, farmer lady. So that didn't need to happen, right? And you don't really think about it as it's happening, but as you go back and watch them a second time, you're like, why did she do that? And the reason why is they just want to show that Moraine is really hardcore and she's vicious and she's willing to go to any lengths to do what she wants to do, right? But I think we already get that, right? Like, she ditched Lan. She's not telling anyone what's going on. She stabbed Lanfear through the back. She's obviously, she killed the Fade earlier in the episode. I don't think we need to be convinced anymore how cool Moraine is. But this instance, they just kind of threw in there, and I thought it was, I don't know, just kind of sad and didn't need to be there. Another example was when Elaine and Nynaeve walk through the gates of Falma, and Elaine is like, oh, Nynaeve, by the way, we're in Falma. This is millions of miles, or not millions, thousands of miles away from the White Tower, and here we are, and let's go off on our adventure. This just seems odd. Like, when I walk into a new city with someone, am I, like, getting the news that I'm in a new place right at that moment? Obviously, they know that they're in Falma. They don't need to have this little piece of writing. It's a little clunky. I wish they were a little more creative in their storytelling to show that, okay, now they are in this place that's really far away. Maybe they could have done some editing or had some kind of map element to it that lets the viewer know where they are without making the cast have this like awkward line that obviously someone wouldn't say in real life. There's some ups and downs, a few more notes in general from the episode. So I like the Shan-Chen. I like their look. I like their vibe. I like that Fane was there for just a minute, but maybe more Fane would be fun because he is a big part of book 2 and he's kind of barely here and we're just like, who is this guy at this point? I think a casual viewer is like, oh yeah, that's the crazy guy, but you don't really understand his role. His role is really big in book 2 and here it's kind of minor. He's just the lackey, right? I do enjoy the parts with Shamael. I like how he's influencing them. And in general, I like that the Dark Friends are at each other's throats as much as they are at the throats of our heroes. This is really at the core of Wheel of Time where there's the gray element of the good and evil. And people like Leandrin and Surath represent that well. And their conflict in between themselves really brings that out. So that is well done. So speaking of gray conflicted groups, I'm glad that the White Cloaks are back. And I really like Dane Bornhald in this episode. He represents a different view into the White Cloaks that we've seen before, and they are, continuing to build up the Perrin White Cloak conflict in a way that I think is going to have some good payoffs later on. So this was well done. They tied it into the Avienda introduction. This whole bit was good, even though, I did say the nighttime stuff was a little hard to see. So let's talk about Varen and Cho Chang in the White Tower. I'm a little confused what Varen is trying to do. I mean, I get what Varen's trying to do. She's trying to find the girls. But what are her core motivations? I guess this is one where I'm going to have to trust the showrunners because I had a similar question about Rand and Logain back a few episodes ago where I was like, how does Rand know Logain is here? What is he trying to accomplish? I assume now, I'll trust the showrunners. They paid it off with Rand and Logain, so I assume we'll get some reason for what Varen's trying to do here. And I liked what she was doing in general. I thought it was a fun investigation plot, and it ties into Leandrin as well. So lots of good connections throughout. Varen is well done. Not amazing. I didn't love it, but I did appreciate these parts. Last main thing to talk about is Egwene, Nynaeve, Elaine. We didn't get a ton of them in this episode. We got a lot previously, so, that's fine. And I think this episode really just kind of served to take them from the White Tower to new circumstances in Falm, and we'll see what happens there. It was done okay. I think the escape, this was pointed out to me on Discord, I think the escape that they had, from, when they were tied up in the bushes and Leandrin let them go, and then all of a sudden they ran out of the little oasis and they were free. That was a little cheesy. It's kind of cut strange, and it seemed like how did they get away? There were a lot of people, a lot of soldiers chasing after them, and they were just kind of stumbling along, and then they're free. And Egwene is captured. And I guess maybe they said, okay, we got one of them. We're going to let the rest go. That was a little weird. At the same time, obviously that needed to happen so that, the plot advances, right? All in all, the season is moving in the right direction. Coming in, my two main beefs were Moraine and Lan. I did not like their dynamic. I did appreciate Moraine more in this episode, although we don't get much of a resolution at all with her and Lan. Hopefully that comes later on. I liked Rosamund Pike's portrayal of her as over her head and someone who doesn't know who to trust and doesn't know where to turn. I think it's frustrating that she doesn't trust Lan at all since they have that history, and it seems like he should be, someone that she relies on. in these troubled times. However, we'll see. The thing that is still not going well is Matt. Matt has nothing to do. He's not in this episode at all. I didn't see him in the scenes in episode 6 that they teased. When is he going to pop up? What is he going to do? He needs to do something in this season. I do trust that he will do something. Otherwise, it's like, what is going on? I don't think the showrunner is going to miss it that badly and not have anything for Matt. But still, we are 5 out of 8 episodes into the season, and he's done basically nothing. And this is not great. So please redeem him. Please redeem him.